If you ask most people what prayer is, you get the same answer. Talking to God. Asking for things. A quiet moment before meals. Something you do in church or maybe only in emergencies when everything else has failed. And that definition isn't wrong, exactly. It's just desperately incomplete, because when you actually look at the original Hebrew and Greek words behind prayer, when you trace the idea through the entire Bible from Genesis to Revelation, what emerges is not a religious ritual. It is a relationship, a confrontation, sometimes a fight, and the Bible's understanding of prayer will completely reshape how you approach it, and why most people quietly give up on it. The Hebrew vocabulary. The Hebrew Bible uses several different words that get translated as prayer in English, and each one is doing something distinct. The most common one is Palal. It appears dozens of times, and its root meaning is strange. It means to intervene, to mediate, to act as a judge between two parties. Already this is different from what most people imagine. Palal is not primarily asking God for things. It is placing yourself between two realities, the world as it is, and the world as it should be, and appealing to the one who has authority over both. When Hannah prays in 1 Samuel, when Solomon prays at the dedication of the temple, when Daniel prays toward Jerusalem, they are all using Palal. They are not whispering wishes. They are intervening, making a case, acting as mediators between human need and divine authority. That's a completely different posture than most people bring to prayer. The second major Hebrew word is sha'al, to ask, to inquire, to demand an answer. This word is used when people ask God directly for something specific. Give us a king. Show us the way. What should we do? It carries no apology, no excessive softening. You are asking God a direct question and expecting a direct answer. The Hebrew Bible treats this as completely normal. The assumption is that God can be questioned, that He welcomes the inquiry, that sha'al, bold, direct petition, is not presumptuous. It is what the relationship is for. The third word is tsa'aq, and its synonym tsa'aq, to cry out, to shriek, to shout in distress. These are not polite prayers. They are the cries of people in desperate circumstances, slaves in Egypt, Israelites under oppression, individuals at the end of their rope. And something remarkable happens every time the Bible uses this word. God hears. Exodus 3:7. God says to Moses, "I have heard the cry of my people." The word is tsa'aq. God does not hear polished religious language. He hears the raw cry of distress. This has profound implications. It means that when you have no words left, when prayer feels impossible, the wordless groan is itself a prayer. The Bible has a word for it. The Psalms, prayer as honest speech. The book of Psalms is the Bible's prayer book, and it is unlike anything else in religious literature, because more than a third of the Psalms are laments, complaints, accusations, protests hurled directly at God. Psalm 88 ends in complete darkness, with no resolution. Darkness is my closest friend. Psalm 44 accuses God directly, "You have rejected and humbled us. You sold your people for a pittance. Wake up, Lord! Why do you sleep? Rise up." These are in the Bible. They are not the exceptions. They are the curriculum. The Psalms are teaching you that honest speech, including anger, including accusation, including the cry that God seems absent, is not the failure of prayer. It is prayer. The Hebrew prophets understood this deeply. Jeremiah, the weeping prophet, curses the day of his birth and accuses God of deceiving him. Job, across 35 chapters, refuses to offer polished religious language about his suffering. He demands an answer, and in both cases God responds, not to the polished prayers of their religious advisors, to the raw, honest, sometimes furious speech of the person actually in pain. The Greek vocabulary step into the New Testament, and the vocabulary shifts, but the ideas deepen. The primary Greek word for prayer is proseuche, from pros, toward, and euche, a vow or wish. Its root meaning is movement toward. You are moving toward God, orienting yourself in His direction. Proseuche is the word Jesus uses when He gives His disciples what we call the Lord's Prayer. It is the word Paul uses when he says, "Pray without ceasing." It describes not a single act, but an ongoing orientation, a life lived turned toward God rather than away from Him. This connects directly to what Augustine and the ancient theologians called incurvatus in si, the self curved inward on itself, turned away from God and neighbor. Proseuche is the counter movement. It is uncurving, turning back toward the one you were designed to face. The second key Greek word is deesis, a specific petition, a request made out of personal need. Where proseuche describes the general practice of prayer, deesis is the specific moment of asking. Paul uses both together in Philippians 4:6, in everything, by proseuche and deesis, with thanksgiving. Present your request to God. He is distinguishing two things: the ongoing orientation of life toward God and the specific moments of asking within that orientation. The third Greek word that unlocks everything is enteuxis, intercession. Literally, it means to fall in with someone who is on a journey, to meet them, and to make a petition on someone else's behalf. This is the word used in Romans 8:26-27, when Paul says the Spirit Himself intercedes for us with groans that cannot be expressed in words. The Spirit Himself is doing enteuxis, meeting us in our weakness and presenting our case before the Father, which means that even when you don't know how to pray, even when prayer feels impossible, something is happening in the unseen that your words cannot access. The intercession continues without you. What Jesus does with prayer, Jesus prays constantly in the Gospels, and the way He prays is instructive. He rises early to pray before dawn, Mark 1:35. He spends entire nights in prayer before major decisions, Luke 6:12. He prays in Gethsemane with such intensity that His sweat falls like drops of blood, Luke 22:44. This is not a man performing religious ritual. This is a man in genuine, costly conversation with his Father. And when His disciples ask Him to teach them to pray, He doesn't give them a theology lecture. He gives them words, short, structured, honest words. Our Father in heaven, you are establishing relationship before request. Your kingdom come. Your will be done. You are aligning yourself with what God is doing before asking for what you need. Give us today our daily bread. Present tense, specific, daily. Not provide for my general needs. Give us today this meal, this need. Forgive us our debts as we also have forgiven our debtors. You are locating yourself in a web of relationships, horizontal and vertical, that prayer cannot ignore. Lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from the evil one, an acknowledgement that you are not strong enough on your own. You need to be led. You need to be delivered. Every line of the Lord's Prayer assumes dependence. It is structured to break the illusion that you are self-sufficient. The prayer, God doesn't answer, and why. The Bible is honest about prayers that don't get answered, and it provides several different diagnoses. James 4:3. You ask and do not receive, because you ask with wrong motives, to spend it on your pleasures. Psalm 66:18. If I had cherished sin in my heart, the Lord would not have listened. But there's a third diagnosis that most people don't talk about: the unanswered prayer as divine wisdom. Paul, in 2 Corinthians 12, describes a thorn in his flesh, some persistent suffering he begged God to remove 3 times, and God said no, not because Paul was praying wrong, but because the thing Paul was asking to be removed was actually the thing keeping him humble enough to be useful. My grace is sufficient for you, For my power is made perfect in weakness. The unanswered prayer became the revelation. The thing God refused to remove became the place where God's power was most visible. The Bible does not promise that God always says yes. It promises that God always responds, and sometimes the response is a no that is actually more loving than any yes could have been. Pulling it together. What prayer actually is Palal. Intervention, mediation, placing yourself between what is and what should be. Sha'al, bold, direct inquiry, asking God a question and expecting an answer. Tsa'aq, the wordless cry of distress that God always hears. Proseuche, the ongoing orientation of life turned toward God. Deesis, specific petition arising from personal need. Enteuxis, intercession, including the Spirit's intercession in your weakness. 6 words, 6 angles on the same reality. Prayer is not a religious performance. It is not a technique for getting what you want. It is not something reserved for religious professionals or people who have their lives together. It is the way a creature who is made for relationship with God actually practices that relationship. Honestly, directly, sometimes angrily, sometimes silently, always turn toward the one who is already turned toward you. The most important thing the Bible teaches about prayer is not how to do it right. It is that God is already listening before you begin.